we are back with a new video, and today we are going to be having a little chat about gearing your Skylanders. And obviously this is as a free-to-play non-compensation player. So before we get into the hardcore stuff of this conversation, I just want to go ahead and drop a disclaimer for you. So obviously, everything that we are about to discuss in this video are my personal views based on my interpretation of how gear works on my Skylanders specifically, and so this video should not be taken as fact but as a reference to guide you in building your teams to your own satisfaction. Right, so now that we've gotten that out the way, let's get to talking about gearing. So as a free-to-play player, my bad, building your Skylanders takes a little longer because you got to put in more thought and strategy, because you don't have the same resources as, you know, your compensation players, your whales and your little dolphins, right? So with that in mind, let's just dive into, you know, some of the details about how you're going to build your Skylanders. There are three main elements that determine how you build your Skylanders. Number one is your team composition, right? And this just means that whatever kind of team you create, whether it be bomb, plague, endo killer, delay, that's going to be a deciding factor. Number two is enchantments. These are the scrolls that you collect from farming the secret scroll dungeon using the feathers that you would have collected from Cyclops. Number three is your portal master, and I'm sure by now all of you know about portal masters, so I don't really have to go in depth with that, right? There is a fourth element, although many of us don't utilize this option. That is usually, or not usually, that is actually the Skylander. The fourth element is the Skylander itself that you're trying to gear up, right? And we'll talk about this in more detail. So gearing up your Skylanders, getting that ether, only really starts with 4-star legendaries pieces, right? It only really starts when you're farming 4-star legendary pieces, but then you only really start optimizing your gear with 5-star and 6-star ether, right? And that's when you're really going to start optimizing, right? So with that in mind, let's look at the rule of thumb for gearing your Skylanders. So as we know, the general rule of thumb is that your DPS needs attack, right? Your DPS, your damage characters need attack, your tanks need HP, defense, and healers need HP. That's the basic starting point for gearing up your Skylanders, right? And that will bring us to the next point, which is then secondary stats, right? So secondary stats, what is that? These are your effect stats, your accuracy, your crit stats, your evasion, boost, defense, penetration, etc. These are assigned based on the main elements mentioned before. So let's take a look at a DPS unit, right? And then as an example, we're going to be using the elements to kind of imagine what kind of gear would use on them, right? So let's take a look at Ember, right? Because she is a damaging unit. If we're using the fourth element, which is the actual Skylander itself, we can then determine what team composition will work best for her by looking at first her element, her skill set, and her innate abilities, right? And then what we will deduce from this is which portal master will work best for her, which enchantments, and which team composition, right? So once that has been figured out, then, you know, we can start gearing. So we know that she is a fire element, right? So her best portal master would probably be Ryu, which grants fire Skylanders additional crit rate and overall the team additional attack power. And then by looking at her kit, you know, we can see that she is an explosion Skylander, more commonly known as bomber units, right? So she is an ideal unit for bomb teams, right? And we can also see that she has a charge ability, so that means that she will lose one turn in a fight to charge up. So when thinking about enchantments, anything that will increase her survival or her survivability, you know, would be the preference that you want to go for. So example would be going for either protection or a vampire, right? And then we can also see that like her cooldowns, are pretty long. So that then also then makes a protection enchantment a much more viable option, right? Now that we have kind of determined what her team composition is and her portal master and what kind of enchantments we could look to or focus on, now we can start looking at what stats do we look for in her gear, right? And at this point, I should definitely make a note that there is no real right or wrong way to build your Skylanders, right? How you should build your Skylanders should really be based on what you are trying to achieve. So you can build it however you like, right? There's no right or wrong way, okay? Now back to Ember. We want to focus on three main stats for Ember, right? We want to focus on attack, we want to focus on crit rate, and we want to focus on crit damage, right? She is literally a nuke, so we want her doing as much damage as Emberly possible. To achieve this, we're going to look at what gear slots she has available. So if we go back over here, you can see which gear slots that she uses, right? And then we're going to determine what gear will be best in that slot, right? And then we'll follow through with that within by looking at the substats that the gear. So let's get into it, before we have like an extremely long video. All right, so when it comes to substats, after having looked at what kind of gear she has and also having looked at her skills, one of her skills, her charge skill, mainly requires you to land hits accurately in order for the explosion to actually land with a 50% chance, which means that one of the substats that you need to be looking for when you're gearing her up is accuracy. The other substats that you really want on the damaging unit, especially one like Ember, is you want to have high crit rate. You want to try and aim for 100% crit rate, and you also want to have as much crit damage as you can scrounge up, right? Her crit damage innate is already pretty high. It's about 185, I think it is. And then her innate crit rate is also pretty high. It's at 25%. I think it's the highest natural crit rate for any of the Skylanders, or legendary Skylanders more specifically, right? And then the next thing that we want to focus on quite heavily is attack, especially because she only has 2 slots open for attack, unlike other damage dealing units which would have 3 slots. Like if we look at Smolder Dash, right? Smolder Dash has got gloves, she's got 2 weapons, right? And then there are other Skylanders that I think could sometimes even get up to 4 slots. We can just stack up on a ton of attack, right? But with Ember more specifically, she is focused, she is kind of more focused, or leans towards being a tanky damage dealer, which is why she's got 2 chest pieces, 1 weapon, 1 glove, 1 head, right? So she's got double HP, 1 defense, double attack. So when it comes to substats, what are we looking for? We're looking for crit damage, we're looking for crit rate number 1, crit rate number 1, crit damage number 2, and then accuracy number 3, right? So if we can't find any gear right now in the early stages of the free-to-play account, especially with the 4-star legendaries, it's not such a big deal. It's not such a big deal if you can't find accuracy. But once you start getting to the 5-star and 6-star legendary runes, what you want to have is at least every single rune should have accuracy as a substat on your Ember, on your damage dealer, that requires an accurate hit, right? Another workaround with accuracy is having a team member, or another Skylander that's in your team comp that has a leader passive or a leader skill which increases accuracy, that then would kind of bridge the gap with how much accuracy you can leave out of your gearing experience. The only other fire element Skylander that is also a bomber team which works in the same composition is Spitfire. So if you have Spitfire as a lead in your bomber team, then it reduces the amount of accuracy that you need to have in your gear stats, right? So you have Spitfire as the leader, giving the team I think it's about 15% accuracy, right? And then you have your Ember, you build her on super attack damage, crit rate, and crit damage, right? What you're also doing is you giving her the protection enchantment because her cooldowns are super long. So because her cooldowns are long, she's probably going to have 1 or 2 turns where she's not moving, and especially since one of the second turns that she's not moving, she's going to be using a charge up ability, right? But in between those turns when she's not using, your protection enchant is going to give her a shield, which is going to increase her survivability, which is great because you're going to be using the Portal Master for fire, which gives you attack up. So you no longer have George, who's keeping your team alive by giving everybody this incredible shield. Now you're going to be using your enchantments to give your team the shield, so that you can now just focus on stacking up on attack, right? And that would be the best kind of way to build Ember, or the best way we can imagine right now to build Ember, right? All right, so till the next one, the next video will be talking about the tanks and the healers. We'll go through it in more detail because we're just gonna jump straight into all the stuff. All right, later.